Recently, I've been interested in the sub-250g FPV plane, so I put together this P-51 that flies really well. But due to an unscheduled water landing, I've had to take it apart. So in the meantime, I figured I'd do a walkthrough on how I put this together. So here it is all taken apart. I guess I'll start with, what is this plane? XKA-280 P-51 Mustang. It's supposed to be about 230 grams once it's all built, but mine is slightly heavier but still under 249. For head tracking, I'm using the FMS SnycPilot system. And what I've done is I've just made a naked version of it, taken it out of the case to save a little bit of space and weight. And I've used one of these 2-pin 1.25mm JST pigtails to make a power lead for it. The flight controller is a FlyingRC F4Wing Mini. So you can see here I've used the receiver pins, but I'm using these 1.25mm JST pigtails for all the other connections. Motor, servos, and one spare to provide power to the SnycPilot system. I chose the Avatar HD Mini 1S Lite kit for this one. It's just a little lighter than the Avatar HD Mini 1S, imagine that, but either one would probably work. And 2mm hardware, Gorilla Tape and Velcro, hot glue, and at the moment I'm using these 7x5 gym fan props. They work really well. I find that for this build, a 3-cell 530 or a 2-cell 850 keep the weight where it needs to be, gets the CG right, and flies pretty well. I'm getting about 5 minutes of flight time on the 852 cell, and I'm not sure how long on the 533 cell, but it's more than 5 minutes. For the ESC, I've just gone with the lightest 12 amp version I could find with a 5 amp back. I put an XT30 on here. I snip this end off and use it for the motor lead. And then I put another one of those 3-pin JST 1.25mm connectors on here. So it ends up looking like this. "2-gram servos. I like to use Metal Gear servos in the wing, but these are all plastic. For a receiver, I'm using this XR1 900. So in order to get this plane down to the weight that it needs to be, in order to add all these extra parts, I've removed most of the lighting system. I've removed the Mach engine exhaust and the lights that were underneath, all the associated wiring, the lighting board, as well as the lights that run down the side of the airframe. I don't really like these lights anyway, so I was happy to remove the weight. As far as lights go, I did keep the lights on the wingtips. I like those, but I removed the gun lights. The LED strips are still inside the housings because it was easier just to pull the wires than to rip these off and possibly damage the wing. You know, that's not totally necessary, but do what you feel comfortable with there. Every little bit that you can remove is going to help. Obviously, I've removed the canopy, the seat, and the pilot, and I've mounted this 2-gram servo with just a little glue. I found a little piece of plastic trash that had a 90-degree angle to it and used it to mount the camera. As you can see, there's a little Velcro in the bottom stuck down to that 90-degree plastic. On the back, there's a little bit of Gorilla Tape that just helps steady the camera. The XKA-280 normally has servos for the elevator and the rudder mounted in the flight controller right here. I chose to move my servos to the rear, like you'll see in a lot of larger RC planes. For the wing, I've made up a connector here that just goes into the SnycPilot system to get power for the wingtip lights. The SnycPilot receiver is mounted right here, and it just slides past this ledge in the fuselage whenever I slide the wing in. I've removed the landing gear mounting points to save a little weight. There's the 2-gram Metal Gear servos, because this is now a belly lander, and servo horns stick out. This is another build that I've put together in order to test out another power system. This is a power system from an FMS 850mm Ranger. It's not the best power system for this, it's a power hog actually. But there's another way of setting this up. I've turned that F4Wing flight controller sideways and mounted it in front of this bulkhead. That created enough space to mount one or both of the servos for the tail in their original spot. With this build, I chose to put one servo in the rear and mount one right behind this bulkhead. Now I show this just to point out that there are options in putting this together which can help to settle CG problems. So here's a view of things before I get it totally put together. You can see the flight controller is all plugged in, other than the aileron connector is hanging out there in free space. One note on this is if you decide to use pigtails and solder them directly to the board, they could be sort of fragile, so be careful with them. They could snap off easier than, like a pin connection. And this other connector over here on the side is going up to the yaw servo for head tracking. So I've cut a small hole at the rear part of the canopy area and fed my wires through for my receiver. I misspoke earlier and said that it had an Avatar HD Mini 1S Lite kit. No, I've been flying it with the Avatar HD Mini 1S kit. So here it is set up the way I've actually been flying it. I've put the 2mm screws through each corner, poked holes in the fuselage, and just kind of shoved them in. They're a friction fit and they hold okay. The power for the camera just runs through the hole where the LEDs were previously and up to the front, where I've taken one of these balance lead connectors and I've soldered a pigtail to it and used a little hot glue to strengthen the area where the solder is. And here's finishing up wiring the wing. As you can see, here's that power lead that I mentioned for the head tracking. I just removed one of the wires from a 3-pin 125mm JS. Comes over here to the power lead for the head tracking receiver. Right next to it, I've got the pigtail for the wing lights, and on the end is the yaw servo. Here's a final look inside with the flight controller, the ESC, and some of the wiring tucked back. The wing is going back on, and the wires tuck in pretty nicely if you train them. And also you can see right here, if I slip the wing back a little further, I'll be able to slide that head tracking unit just beyond that ledge. Also, as I'm closing it up, I've created a little notch right here in the fuselage for the antenna for head tracking. So here it is all put back together. You can see the head tracking antenna comes out there. There's the video antenna, and there's the antenna for the plane's receiver. So I've got it all put back together, and I figured I'd weigh it. But first I thought I'd also mention, well, that cut right there, don't worry about that. That was something I tried earlier. A couple of other things I removed. This LED back here and the landing gear. That's a significant amount of weight when you're talking about something this small. So I felt the need to mention it. But I pretty much removed most anything that wasn't needed. I'm going to put a battery in it and see what it weighs. Okay, we're zeroed out. I'll show you what each one of these batteries weighs. Looks like 36 for the 850. And I think it's the same basically. 37 for the 530. So I've got the 530 installed in here. I'm going to put the lid on and get a weight. And we're looking at 246 grams. Perfect.